Gentlemen, you've made sacrifices to get to this point. Every one of you. But we have an opportunity to make every ounce of that sacrifice worth it. Now, I'd be lying to you if I said this is how we planned it. We've suffered devastating losses. I know that. There's no way around it. But this is the hand that we've been dealt. No one else is coming through that door. We're gonna win because of the guys that we have in this room. I don't care what the odds say. I don't care what the analysts say. We play the game. So you have a choice. You can let the world tell you who you are, or you can make a statement. Do your job. Leave everything you've got out there on the field. Protect. Make every catch. Make every block, every tackle. Hit harder. Run faster. Dig deeper. And when the fourth quarter hits and you're exhausted, when every muscle in your body is screaming at you to quit, look at the guy next to you, and I promise you, you'll find that last bit of strength. Because I know you will not let him down. Let's go make history. Welcome to the Grey Cup edition of the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. From pregame speeches to postgame pressers, everything in between, we're here to break it all down for you and get you set for Sunday night's Grey Cup matchup between the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Toronto Argonauts at BC Place. Ben Grant joined as always by JB. We got a jam-packed show for you once again today. And here is the lineup. We're going to talk about Nick Arbuckle, talking about the fans of Montreal laughing and chanting after Chad Kelly's injury. I want to tell you what I saw and what to maybe make of this. Plus, we got to talk about the Brian Scott signing with the Chad Kelly injury. Brian Scott has come in. The Argos fortunate he was available, and he's one of, one guy that's been on both rosters, both Grey Cup rosters this season, which is kind of an interesting place to be coming from. The TV ratings are in from last week's division final. 1.7 million people saw the Argonauts and Alouettes play. We'll talk about that. Plus, Commissioner Ambrosi took a lot of questions this week from the press, spent a lot of time with the press. One of the things he talked about was Rogers Communications and their purchase. They're basically taking over of the Argos and taking over of MLS Lee, and what that might mean and what Commissioner Ambrosi took from it. Plus, we know Nick Arbuckle has been named the starter. Coach Dinwiddie was asked a lot about Arbuckle this week. Had positive things to say, obviously, but one thing that stood out was he said he didn't want him to overthink, and I want to talk about what that means and sort of the meaning behind it. Plus, we'll get into all our usual stuff, PFF grades, game previews, OCDC, one thing, predictions, put me down for 20, and our CFL picks, all that and more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. JB, Sunday night, Grey Cup. It's all happening at Something in the Water Brewing. They are doing a Grey Cup party. It went so well last week with their viewing party. JB, you were there last week, got to see how that went down, and they're going bigger and better this time for the Grey Cup. And so you got to get down to Something in the Water Brewing to check out their Grey Cup party. They're doing, and I just want to go through some of this for you because they've got so much stuff going on. They're going to be giveaways, they're going to be contests, they're going to be great food deals. Plus, the first 5 Argos fans that arrive in gear and sit down with a pint in front of them are going to win Longboat Pale Ale prize packs from Something in the Water Brewing. So mark that down. If you want a Longboat Pale Ale prize pack, get into Something in the Water Brewing on Sunday pre-game with your Argos gear on and a pint in front of you. The first 5 get Longboat Pale Ale prize packs. So that's something you don't want to miss out on. Plus, all the other great stuff going on down there. The prizes, the giveaways, the great food, the great beer. And when the Argos win, they say it'll turn into a real party. So check out Something in the Water Brewing in Liberty Village Sunday night for Grey Cup. Let's get into
fantastic.
these.
It was an awesome environment last week. And, you know, if it's doable and you're just, you know, not doing anything else very exciting, it's really fun to watch a game, especially a game when you're such underdogs with fellow fans.
Yeah, that is going to be a fun environment because of that, because it will kind of bring everyone together here. And they're going to bring out the big screen, the big sound like they did last time. That worked really well, I gather. So, yeah, you don't want to miss Something in the Water's Grey Cup party. JB, let's talk about this Nick Arbuckle comment. So he talked about Montreal fans laughing and chanting after Kelly's injury. And I wanted to give you my thought on that. And I've talked to a lot of Argos fans who were at the game. From what I gather, and again, having talked to people sitting in different sections and from my own perspective up in the broadcast booth, I didn't hear that at all. And most of the fans that I talked to didn't hear that either. The ones who did were sitting over by the Argos bench. And I think my guess is that's where it was coming from. And I think we're talking about a fairly small group of fans who were, to laugh during someone's injury. It doesn't matter who they are. That sort of behavior, obviously, we don't want to encourage. And I think the CFL as a fan base generally is excellent. I think every team does a great job, is very welcoming. I've traveled to every CFL city, and of course, people are going to give each other a hard time sometimes about their fandom, and that's part of sports. That's part of cheering for a team. But in my experience, it rarely crosses the line. But I think there are inevitably on every single fan base, I think Toronto included, there are always a group of fans that don't necessarily represent the rest of the fan base. And what I saw from the opposite side of the stadium in Montreal was really classy behavior from the Montreal Alouettes fans who stood and applauded as Chad Kelly was taken off the field on a stretcher. Because that's what you do when an athlete suffers a serious injury and is stretchered off the field. You stand and you clap and you pay your respects that way because you were coming to watch the athletes on the field. And that's the entertainment that you were there for. And when life kind of happens in front of you and a real injury occurs, you give it your respect. And it doesn't matter the team they play on, it doesn't matter who they are, that's just what you do. And the Montreal fans did that.
Yeah, I think it's probably a little skewed. Obviously, Arbuckle would be, passionate about his teammate and friend, and even one person yelling something untoward would make your blood boil. And if a couple of idiots behind the bench, within shouting range of him, I think that we don't need to paint the whole stadium with that brush, but on the other hand, he is right. I mean, obviously he did hear it. And so there are some idiots out there, and it'd be great if you could catch them, but I think you just have to kind of move on.
And unfortunately, like I said, every fan base of every sports team around the world, you're going to have a few people like that. But I don't think you want to paint an entire fan base with that. And I don't think that's what Nick was intending to do. I think he was standing up for his teammate. And I love that. And maybe this is what inspired it, because, of course, the whole Argos bench jogged over to Kelly. Everyone that was on the field was taking a knee around Kelly, and everyone that was on the bench jogged over as Kelly was being put on the stretcher. And I don't know if that was because of what was being said and they thought, you know what, we got to get in here and show our support here for our fallen teammate, or if it was something that would have happened organically anyway. But I wonder if that might have been related to the comments that were coming from behind the bench. The Argos have signed quarterback Brian Scott, fan favorite. He's back in Toronto with the Argonauts. Well, of course, he never really even got to the Toronto part of it. Had to go immediately to Vancouver because, of course, they're playing at BC Place. First of all, the Toronto Argonauts are really lucky that Brian Scott was available, because I don't know who else fills that role. You want to have three quarterbacks on your roster because you don't want to have a roster spot for Chad Kelly, who's not even present. Like, he can't even fly. He had to be driven back from Montreal to Toronto because he's not in condition to be able to fly. And so Brian Scott, the only other person on the planet that knows the Argonauts offense. And so for him to be available was hugely lucky for the Argonauts, and they have brought him in. He was the only answer, and obviously the best answer too. But on a personal level too, we really like Brian Scott, and so great to see him back as a member of the Toronto Argonauts. Hopefully it's not a situation where he's needed this week, but you at least know he's a guy that knows the offense and can get in there and sling it. And let's not forget, limited, extremely limited, but Brian Scott was 5 for 5 for 79 yards and a touchdown in his only action for the Argos this season. And that was against Montreal, so against a quality opponent. But yeah, JB, you got to be happy to see Brian Scott back, but it's not like they had a lot of options either.
No, it's great. We both like him, and I think that he somebody deserves to be in the mix as a professional football player. And we could do with a little bit of good karma, a little bit of good juju coming into the camp. So I'm all for it.
And he, of course, spent time with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. That's one of the things that makes the story so strange, is that He went unsigned for a while. He was available for a little while, and then he was brought in with Jake Dolegala to the Winnipeg system and spent some time on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers roster. And so was eventually released, but yeah, is in a unique position of having been on both Grey Cup contending teams this season. That doesn't happen. I would love to know the last. I should have looked this up before we started recording, but who was the last quarterback to within a season be on both Grey Cup rosters? It definitely does not happen a lot. So that one's kind of interesting and a fun story, and great for Brian Scott. I know how well he is loved by the fan base. The fans in Toronto adore Brian Scott, and it is hard to find a quarterback that has had less playing time that is that well loved by the fan base. And that just tells you what kind of individual he is. He's reached out to fans. He's been accessible and available and so supportive. He supported our title sponsor, Something in the Water Brewing. He's been great with us, going out of his way to know if we needed anything. And I think that is how the whole fan base feels about him. So nice to see him back on a CFL roster for sure. Are you surprised at all by the TV ratings this week? I know we thought they would be big. I was expecting well over 1 million. I don't know that I thought we would see 1.7 million total viewers. That's between English and French viewership, up 18.2% from the same two teams playing in the East Final last season. That is a huge statement. What goes into numbers being that great?
It's hard to explain. There wasn't really anything that sort of suggested that this was going to be an all-time record year. There isn't a star per se that's driving those numbers. But I mean, clearly, whether it be a combination of people who are cheering for the Argos and people who hate the Argos, they are drawing eyeballs. They are, they are the team that people want to watch play. I've never seen the likes of it. I mean, I would have thought last year would have been more the case as that team was so elite. But it's a very curious dynamic. I mean, attendance was up a little, but I have to assume this is more of the country tuning in. Maybe not hoping Toronto, like only to see Toronto lose, but tuning in to see what will happen.
I think they wanted to see a good football game, and they did see a good, like of all the games to watch, like if you're looking to showcase a game where anything can happen, like everything happened in that game. You saw passing touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, sacks, fumbles, interceptions, a pick six, a kick return touchdown, like everything.
It may just be as simple as that, as like the previous game was, a carnival, and then they followed it up with another carnival, which will probably, I can't imagine you watch Montreal, Toronto, and would not watch the Grey Cup.
Well, that's the thing. It's not like you'll watch either of those games and be like, I don't know, CFL's not for me. Like you can't. As a sports fan, as a generic football fan, you can't watch those games and just think like, I don't know. You're in if you watch those. And I think that's maybe what goes into it. The numbers were good last week in the playoff game against Ottawa. And I think a lot of those people tune back in. Plus, you're bringing the Montreal fan base with you, which is significant. But I want to make clear, just on English TV numbers alone, just the English language broadcast, Toronto, Montreal outdrew the West Final between Saskatchewan and Winnipeg. Think about that. So the West Final is 1.1 million. So exact numbers are 1,114,900. And the East Final number is 1,714,000, and about 420,000 of those are from RDS. So even without RDS, the Alouettes Argos outdrew Winnipeg, Saskatchewan. That is certainly saying something. Now, time of day matters. I think if they had flip-flopped time slots, I don't know that you'd necessarily have the same results. But either way, I think that's a really positive sign for the CFL. I think it's really positive for the Toronto Argonauts. But yeah, I think as a whole, you've got some teams that are really getting healthy in terms of their fan base. Montreal is fantastic. A lot of the stuff that I saw last week in Montreal was highly encouraging, from the buzz around the city to obviously the sellout. But yeah, everything about what's happening with football in general in that province is really positive. So yeah, great to see. Love those TV numbers. So Commissioner Ambrosi, addressed Rogers Communications this week and the new ownership situation and people wanting to know what's in store for the Argos in the future. And I've pulled two quotes from Randy Ambrosie's press conference that I thought were pretty positive. So here's what he said. I was incredibly impressed. And sorry, this is with Edward Rogers III and the CEO, Tony Staffieri. So he's talking to both of those guys. So in the quote, when I mentioned Edward and Tony, that's who he's referring to. I was incredibly impressed by the conversation. I thought it was very engaging and a very pleasant conversation. Edward asked a lot of questions about the league, was very curious about some of the things that we've been developing. Nothing in the conversation with Edward and Tony led me to any other conclusion other than that they were committed to the ownership of the Argonauts. It was not a long meeting, but it was enough for me to leave with a good feeling to what I had seen and heard. So what I can tell you is that in my limited interactions, but covering Randy Ambrosie for what, 6-7 years now, I found him to be very truthful. He doesn't always answer questions. I think sometimes he avoids questions or kind of takes the answer in a different direction. But when he answers a question, I've found for him to be extremely honest. And I think that this answer, he didn't avoid it. He didn't dodge anything. He just said, this is what I saw. This is what I think. This has to be very positive for Argos fans to come away with this, because I think there was some nervousness. Anytime there's new ownership, I think there's nervousness. But this is probably good news to hear from Rogers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else they would say, really, but I can't. I mean, I have to imagine that Rogers were, happy with the, not their numbers, but certainly happy with the TV numbers.
Oh yeah, for sure they would be. And you know what I'm starting to think about too? Like now that they basically own every sports team, I'm wondering too, like I actually have started thinking about like what's the plan down the road. I know this is an off-season topic, so we won't get too deep into this, but I was thinking like, are you trying to frame it so that you've got no games that ever go against any other games, or are you trying to push multiple different networks at once? Are you trying to actually create matchups at the same time in sports that cross over in terms of season length and stuff? So I don't know, it's just interesting stuff. I think it's going to be a really interesting offseason to see once Rogers has a moment to catch their breath and look at what they've got on the CFL landscape, but adding that into all the MLSE properties and the Toronto Blue Jays. We'll see what they come up with, but I do think it's fascinating going forward. So that will be an offseason topic. So we know that Nick Arbuckle has been named the starter. I thought Coach Dinwiddie said a lot of interesting things. He joked around a little bit, saying that the sleeves are gone, the headband's gone, sort of those traits that we are the easy way to recognize Arbuckle on the practice field. I know my kids loved watching Arbuckle on the practice field in 2021 because of that the bandana and the sort of muscle tees that he had going on. But he's gotten rid of that. Dinwiddie joked about that a little bit. In terms of the serious responses that he said he had a lot of faith in Arbuckle. There's comfort in him being a veteran, in knowing what the situation is, and he's seen maturity in Arbuckle as well. I thought there was a really interesting moment, though, where he talked about, I guess, kind of answering, like, what happened to Arbuckle. Like, he was supposed to be the next big thing. He came into Toronto to be sort of the franchise guy, and that never really happened. And it didn't happen in his next two stops, either in Edmonton or in Ottawa. And then when he's talked about the idea of overthinking and over-preparing, referred to Arbuckle as being a highly intelligent guy, a guy that he's actually had to kick out of the weight room for spending too much time there, for being, I guess it sounded like to me like almost obsessive about success and being prepared. And then when he talked about overthinking things, and sometimes there's too much film where you start seeing things that aren't even there anymore. What do you make about the comments that he had about Arbuckle and the sort of overthinking element that he's addressing?
I think Arbuckle has done well in relief situations where he's just using his football instincts and he's running from a pretty small playbook, and he hasn't rep many of these plays with the starters. So he doesn't have many to choose from, and he's not worrying, is this the right play? Are they in this defense? Because, I only know this many plays, so these are the plays we're going to run. And there's something very freeing about that. about not having to pick the perfect play because you don't have a perfect play option. You don't have that many plays, and as his playbook gets bigger, that's the concern. The one of the primary criteria for a quarterback to be a star is how fast they process information. And if you are processing things and then trying to think of what play can I use here or what play can I use next, or if he is covered, who's my next guy, and then who's the next guy after that. You can get sort of your paralysis by analysis. You can not just pull the trigger and throw the ball and throw it at your first guy. Like we've often said this, like when you put in a quarterback, if your quarterback gets hurt, you put in a guy and you're like, it's one look, and if you don't see him, run. And a lot of times that's very freeing for the person playing quarterback. You don't feel the weight of the world. You just kind of you got one read, you don't see him, run for your life. And that's kind of a pressure-free place. And I'm sure that's where coach wants him to be. Not you're the quarterback of this team, and if we lose, it's your fault. There's no pressure on you. Just go out there, react, throw what you throw. Don't try and learn, 100 more plays this week because that's not who you are. It's not what the Argos want. They don't have the time to rep it. They don't want his head swimming. They want him just reacting to what he sees and throwing.
The best thing in the world for Arbuckle, in my mind, is that there's not a 2-week hiatus between the division final and the Grey Cup like there is in the Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
If he had an extra week, I don't know if I like Arbuckle's chances here. I think it's a perfect situation. He has no time. He has no time to overthink this. You can't, like, Grey Cup week, it really, I talked about this on social media this week. Grey Cup really should be 2 weeks apart. And this is a whole different tangent. I wasn't planning on going down today, but I just want to tie this into what we're talking about with Nick Arbuckle. The amount of stuff they have to do this week, it is so absurdly busy. You would never accept this level of, this amount of stuff to do during a regular season week. It's weird that the most important game of the year comes in such a short time span. And you're saying, well, what? It's 8 days. Like, that's more than you get for your usual week. Yeah, but remember, these teams flew out Monday. So they had a game Saturday. And for Toronto, they're not even in their home city. So they got a game Saturday. They fly in, they get in the middle of the night to Toronto. They have Sunday to sort of catch up on their sleep a little bit. But they got to pack, they got to get ready. There's game planning to do, there's film to watch, all that stuff. They got to get on a plane Monday, head to Vancouver, and then all week there are these commitments. And then you've got the awards banquet ceremonies and coaches having to spend time with the media, players having to spend time with the media. It is nonstop media availabilities and engagements that you have to be a part of. And that's on top of playing the most important game of the season. And so while that sounds terrible, it may be the best thing in the world for Nick Arbuckle.
Absolutely. I think Coach She's like, you are, you are best when you are off the bench and you are just reacting and looking for the open guy and, scrambling and throwing. And essentially, that's what we need from you. We need you to be in control, but we do not need you to try and come in and be Chad Kelly or to have the choices that Chad has when he's under center. Like, we need you to have, a much, much smaller focus and, just go out and concentrate on the plays well, and, we'll pick you up. We don't need you to win this Grey Cup for us. We just need you to, to not cost us the Grey Cup.
And some of his best performances for the Toronto Argonauts have come when we didn't know necessarily that he was going to be playing, or at least playing that much. So you go back all the way to 2021. He was supposed to be the guy, but remember, he had an injury at the end of training camp in 2021. So McLeod Bethel-Thompson started in Calgary, got the win. And so Coach Dinwiddie decided, well, let's, Arbuckle's not 100%. Let's just ride with MBT into week 2. That was in Winnipeg. McLeod Bethel-Thompson didn't play well. Winnipeg was winning that game handily. Arbuckle came in at the end in relief and looked so great that Dinwiddie's like, well, I guess we got to flip this and go back with Arbuckle the next week in Toronto. But It was a little bit cagey. We didn't necessarily know who was going to get that start. And it was at home against Winnipeg, as home and home. And Arbuckle goes out and beats the Blue Bombers, where they didn't necessarily have the same sort of prep that you would if they'd known 100%, okay, this is the guy we're going to be seeing. And then you fast forward to this season, look at Arbuckle's three big performances. First is against Winnipeg, and Cam Dukes gets the start. Arbuckle comes in relief, and they beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at BMO Field in overtime. Then fast forward to the end of the season, it's in Edmonton. Cam Dukes gets the start because Chad Kelly's resting. Dukes gets injured. Arbuckle has to come off the bench and plays as well as I've ever seen Nick Arbuckle play, has an outstanding game against the Elks. And then into this past weekend where he's not expecting to play, Chad Kelly goes down with an injury. Arbuckle comes in and just throws dimes, makes really good decisions, and doesn't miss with the football. So it's the best case scenario for him when he doesn't overthink. I completely agree with that assessment. And I think this, of all weeks, believe it or not, is actually the perfect week to be starting Nick Arbuckle, because he has had you cannot overthink Grey Cup week. There simply isn't time.
No, and I would not, and I also think it would not be surprising if we had a little Duke's intermission in the middle of the game.
I would love that. I would love to see that as well. I don't think we will, but I think that would be a really nice wrinkle to be able to throw in, just to have another. You've got Duke's packages. We've seen them throughout the season, so why not? Why not put that out there? JB, PFF team of the week this week was filled with Blue Bombers and Argonauts. And I think that tells you that the right two teams won last week's division final. You have Winnipeg with 11 players, Toronto with 8. Saskatchewan and Montreal both had 4 on there. And these don't take into account results. These are just individual player performances. So, yeah, you've got, I think in that sense, the best two teams that advanced. Winnipeg looked fantastic throughout the game. Their 11 players aren't surprising. You've got quarterback Zach Collaros, running back Brady Oliveira. You've got 2 receivers there in Kenny Lawler, who was doing things deep, and Nick Dembski, who was doing things short. You've got both guards, Liam Dobson, Patrick Neufeld on there. Neufeld had a really nice game. He's had a rough season at times, had a very nice game last week. And then Willie Jefferson off the edge, no surprise. Michael Griffin II from the cover linebacker spot. That's interesting to see. Terrell Bonds, cornerback from Winnipeg, also interesting to see, because you don't want to throw on the other side of the field to Ford, and if you've got Bonds playing great football too, that makes Winnipeg pretty dangerous. Evan Holm from the halfback spot, also being recognized, and Jameson Sheehan, the punter for Winnipeg, being honored too. On the Toronto side of things, 2 receivers, DeMonte Coxey, no surprise there. Makai Polk, a little bit more subtle, I suppose, in his excellence last week, but still noticeable. Dejon Allen, the right tackle, represented on the defense. Jake Serezna, no surprise. Wyndham McManus, also no surprise. Tavares McFadden maybe is, because if I told you there was one corner on the Argos last week that got recognized by PFF's team of the week, is it Tavares McFadden, or is it the guy that had a pick six and picked off the 2-point conversion, the same 2 points that the Argos won by? I think you'd say Benji Franklin, but McFadden had a great game, and he was in on some turnovers as well. So the scoring is always it's not necessarily indicative of stats. And then of course Royce Metier from the safety position, and Janarian Grant with that punt return touchdown is recognized as well. So 8 Argos, 11 Blue Bombers. This is shaping up to be a heavyweight fight. It's lost a little bit of that shine because Chad Kelly is not in the game. If Chad Kelly's in this game, you're looking at these 2 powerhouses that are on this collision course. And we've lost some of that narrative because of the fact that with Chad Kelly gone, it's almost like everyone stopped talking about the rest of the Toronto Argonauts. Like the team is suddenly no good without him. Is Toronto getting maybe disrespected a little too much for one player being down when this team still managed half a season and more? They played 10 games this year without Chad Kelly and finished the East final without Chad Kelly. Is there too much disrespect here, JB?
That's a very interesting question. I wouldn't go so far as disrespect. However, I think it does show maybe that there are a lot of people who talk about the Grey Cup who don't necessarily follow the league intently from May to September. I think that there were times, of course, with Dukes and Arbuckle that it did not look great at the beginning of the season, but the team was able to get wins. This is not a team that simply lost every game and then when Kelly came in went on a win streak. I mean, this was a team that played well, played um, complementary football, and when they played the complementary football, they were able to defeat very good teams. They didn't just beat up on teams that weren't very good, and so I think yes, I think that there's a little bit of washing their hands of the Argos uh, a little too quick. However, it is also very reasonable. Look, quarterback is the most important position. We've seen that the first half Argos were not Grey Cup favorite. They are Grey Cup favorite with Chad Kelly. It will be one for the firesides and the Mount Olympus if they're able to pull this off. I don't think we should also underestimate how big an upset this would be because I think both are true. I think that you can believe that Toronto's defense and special teams are both elite, and that this is a team that is not dependent on Kelly having to get here, but it's also a car with three wheels.
I love this position for the Toronto Argonauts. I really like it, and I actually feel really comfortable for the Toronto Argonauts in this spot. It is so much like, to me, I think it's a lot of disrespect to the rest of the team. You look around that team of stars. You look at guys like Wynton McManus and that entire offensive line, the entire defensive line, the guys that have made plays all season long, like Deshaun Amos and Royce Metier, the playmaking ability we've seen out of Tavares McFadden and Franklin. Like, there's so many guys, Makai Polk, Tavares, Coxie. These guys are pros. They're really good football players. And what you see in this line, because I don't know what the line would have been with Chad Kelly in, but I think it's probably a pick 'em. I don't think anyone's favored by more than a point and a half at most. I think it's a really even game. And so it's now a 10-point spread. At one point yesterday, it was an 11-point spread. You're saying that this one guy is worth an 11-point swing. I don't know if I've ever seen anything that extreme before. And I think this Toronto Argonauts team, from the coaching staff on down, has too many good people. Like it, I think it's strange that there's that much of a spread in this game. It's really odd. It's not even being played in Winnipeg, and even that I think would be weird. But it's not. It's played on a neutral site. The fact that we're talking about a 10-point spread, I think, is amazing. And as a coach, as Dinwiddie, I would love that. As a player, I would love that. Nothing would make me happier than seeing this situation as a player. So I think, instead of being offended by it or anything like that, I think they got to be thrilled because, again, this is a time to go and prove to everybody how good a team you are and how no one player makes a team. And I agree with you. Nothing's more important than quarterback. Chad Kelly, I think, reigning MVP, has to be considered, if not the best quarterback in the league, right there with the best quarterbacks in the league. And so, yes, huge loss. But there's a lot of other guys on that roster who are, I think, maybe not being considered enough when you line up with a 10-point spread. Let's get into our game preview, JB. So some interesting stats as I started looking things up for the game preview this week. There's a few 7-0 numbers that jumped out. So the Toronto Argonauts are 7-0 against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Grey Cup games, the earliest being 1937, the most recent, of course, 2022. That's odd. It's a really weird number. I don't think stats like this don't have any bearing on this game, nor does this next one, but I think they're pretty fascinating. The Argos have not lost a Grey Cup game that they've been involved in forever. In fact, it's been 7 straight Grey Cup wins in Grey Cup games they've been involved in. That is absurd. You're playing against the best team in the West each of those times. You're playing a champion every single time you play a Grey Cup. So winning half of them is expectation. Going 7-0 in those is just odd. I don't know what to make of those numbers. I don't think they have bearing necessarily on this game. Maybe that 2022 win does in some way, but I think that's the only one. And then looking at the head-to-heads this year, first meeting, Toronto playing Winnipeg was at BMO Field. Toronto was without Chad Kelly, without Jared Brinkman, without Flo Remalade, and the Argos won 16-14. Caleras threw for 300 yards, but that was about it. Brady Oliveira really didn't get going, had a bit more through the passing game than you would like, but didn't have one of those. He didn't play badly, but it wasn't like he dominated the game and they were able to lean on him down the stretch. Both teams slowed the game right down. Dukes got the start. Arbuckle took over. Kadeem Carey averaged 6.2 yards per carry in that. Toronto's offense struggled otherwise to score points, but the defense held Winnipeg to just one touchdown that day. And I think fans are starting to realize we might need to see a repeat of some sort of defensive performance like that against these Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the Grey Cup game. And then some 10 weeks later, they go to Winnipeg, and this one Toronto kind of dominated in the first half, but had trouble punching it in. Toronto led 13-4 at half and then couldn't move the ball in the second half. This was with Chad Kelly. This was with a full Toronto Argonauts roster. And that's maybe the scary moment here, because Chad Kelly just over 200 yards passing in that. They couldn't really run the ball. And it came down to the wire at the end with Zach Collaros scrambling on a 3rd and 18 and coming up inches short in what was a very controversial call and replay review at the time. The Argos hang on to win in regulation 14-11. So the Bombers score 11 points in Winnipeg. They score 14 in Toronto. Is this the exact kind of game you want to try and duplicate if you're the Argos coming into the Grey Cup game this week, JB? You have to hold them to fewer than 14 points?
I mean, that would be ideal. I don't think they're going to be able to. I think they're going to need more. They're going to need more special teams, more defensive scoring. My guess is that the score is going to be a little higher. I mean, on one hand, Winnipeg did play as well as they possibly could. And traditionally in sports, when you have a team do that in the semifinal, they come into the final not quite firing at the same rate, which would be terrific. But I mean, it's going to have to be low 20s. Toronto cannot, this cannot be a 35-32 game like it probably would have been with Kelly. They absolutely are not. They're not built to go down the field with Dukes or Arbuckle. They're built to have some success. They're built to be able to flip the field with their punter. Defensively, kind of put pressure on, and kick field goals with their league best field goal kicker. But they are not. This is not a team that's going to. I don't think is going to score a lot of touchdowns.
It's time for OCDC. For OCDC, we will start with the visiting Winnipeg Blue Bombers. That's how this has worked out. Toronto, the home team, gets the home dressing room and all of the home field advantages, even though the game is being hosted by a West City in BC. So I will start off with the Winnipeg offense and how I would attack the Toronto defense if I was the offensive coordinator for the Blue Bombers. So first of all, I'm going to try and do some of what Montreal came out with before and some of what we saw Ottawa experiment a little bit with weeks ago before they went to their all-passing game. But there's been a few teams this year that have briefly experimented with loading up and getting lots of heavy personnel on the field and seeing what they could do. I would argue that Montreal's the only team that saw success with this, but I think that Winnipeg's got the tools to be able to do that. So I want them to load up on heavy sets, pound the football. Even when it's not there, you soften them up and you start wearing them down. And that's the long game that you're playing. With Chad Kelly out, as Winnipeg, I'm not thinking, okay, I got to put up 35 points. What I'm thinking about is I need to protect a small lead in the fourth quarter. And so I want a tired Toronto defensive line. I want to pound the football again and again and again. You keep running Oliveira, and you challenge those offensive linemen to keep generating first downs. And even when you don't, you're hoping that it will pay off in the fourth quarter. I think you also want to try and hit some of those, like Dembski is such a pesky player for teams like the Argonauts who want to play back. We've seen that be a problem sometimes for the Toronto's defense. Dembski is really happy to run 5-yard hook routes, and Collaros is really happy to throw them too. And we've seen Fajardo do this with Toronto too, but Collaros will take that all day long. If you're giving Dembski a little bit of a cushion, just keep plugging away at that. Get your 5 or 6 yards at a time. Move all the way down the field. And then once they start creeping in a little bit, once they start closing in, now you can take some deep shots. And that's when you open it up to Lawler, Wilson, Wheatfall, whoever you can get deep downfield. I think that's got to be your strategy. I want to stay away from Lawler a little bit. I feel like Toronto's going to be angling his way. And I don't necessarily know how much of the rest of the receiving core I trust. So I really want to make this a Dembski game, and then I will take shots for Lawler when Toronto lets me. But other than that, I think that's going to be my game. Bruising running game, chipping away with Dembski. JB, what is your Winnipeg plan for shutting down the Toronto Argonauts? What do you do if you're the Winnipeg defense?
Well, this could get a little dark here for a moment. I think. Well, no, Winnipeg has not been this season a big sack team. So their line hasn't been, now they have some guys who are very dangerous, are a bit older, but this is the kind of game where maybe they unleash them. They don't have the front that they've had in the past, but I just can't see how they won't come after Arbuckle in the first quarter. I think it would be malpractice if you didn't bring at least 5 people on every snap in the first quarter. If you're scared of Arbuckle, then I don't know what to tell you. I think that he's good and he can make plays and he can scramble, and his scrambling will probably be the difference. How effective he is at getting outside of that pass rush and forcing them to dial back that pass rush a little bit. The Argos are not a great screen team. They will be all over the screen with Arbuckle. I'd certainly prefer that they didn't throw screens. I would much rather him just scramble than have a guy get cut in half on a 4-yard drop off, because Big Hill is just sitting in, they're just waiting in the weeds. They're like, I know you're going to throw this screen, and then I'm going to chop this guy in half. So I think tons and tons of heat. I'm not worried about confusing Arbuckle. I think you want to play as much man coverage as you can. A lot of man too. You want that first look to be covered, and you're hoping to get home. I think it's as simple as that, and you're not really worried about the run game. It's not something that Toronto has. Like when Toronto is going well, hopefully they don't go away from the run. But it can be the issue is really going to be how disheartening are things, right? It's incredibly disheartening if you get stuffed on run and then sack on second down, and now you got a punt. And Toronto has to do everything in their power to not have 2 or 3 of those in a row. It's just tough on the bench. It's tough on the belief, and belief is what feeds the defense. Belief feeds everything. So that's where I think Arbuckle is going to have to play great this first quarter. He's going to have to back them off with his arm, and if he can't, then that's probably all she wrote. I think the first quarter is going to be absolutely huge for him, and just slowing Winnipeg down, slowing that rush. Because if I'm Winnipeg, I'm going to bring, get out my big book of blitzes, and here we go. Let's roll through all those blitzes we do at practice, but I never call in the game, and that's what we're going to do. And the offensive line. It's good. It's a tall order. It's a tall order for them in that first quarter, because of course pass rush slows down. Nobody can run as fast and hard as they can the whole game, so that will calm down. He won't be running for his life the whole game. They have to weather that. But yeah, if I'm Winnipeg, that's what I'm doing for sure.
And I think, like, for me, switching over to the other side of the ball, we're now looking at the Toronto Argonauts. So I'll look at the Toronto offense and how I would coordinate that and what I might call and what I might run. But just to respond to like what you said and transitioning to that, I feel pretty comfortable with some of the things that Winnipeg's going to throw at Arbuckle. Now, I'm not expecting him to move the ball up and down the field. I don't think Toronto's going to be able to score 35 points. I'm not saying that. I like Arbuckle's ability to adjust protection. I think I have faith in him to be able to do that. I also like his ability to read coverage immediately. Where what he doesn't have with Chad Kelly, he doesn't have the ability to make every single throw the way that Chad does. He certainly doesn't have the ball velocity that Chad does. I don't think he has the accuracy that Chad does either. But the mental parts, I'm not really worried about. And I think you can actually, I don't think you even have to really simplify too much. I think you, like, unlike most situations, usually when you go to a backup quarterback, you're talking about simplifying. You're talking about, well, let's just shave it down to this. Here's our one read. You're running smash. Just read this corner. I don't think they need to do that with Arbuckle. You saw at the end of that Montreal game, there's complexity. Arbuckle on that play that made the game, the Arbuckle to Dave Unger pass of 20 yards. He read immediately, hey, this is a three-man rush. I got time. I'm going to wait for this. I got a long developing route that's going to come across that middle of the field. He waited, he evaded, stepped up in the pocket, and then just fired an accurate bullet right down the field into Dave Unger's hand over Tyrese Beverett, right into the hands of Dave Ungerer. And then on the play after that, saw the mismatch that he had, where he had Brissett in a matchup he loved. And he's like, well, that's where I'm going. Easy read, pre-snap. I'm going after it. He saw heat was coming, knew he had to get rid of it quickly. Like that mental processing, I love. And so I want to avoid the temptation for the Argos to bring in trick plays, to just everything in the kitchen sink. I know mentally it is that kind of game. You got nothing to lose, so you may as well bring out what you have. But I'm just not sure the Argos need that. At least not yet.
Especially not early.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to see, like, if I see flea flickers and halfback passes in the first quarter,
it just reeks of desperation.
Yeah, I don't think we need it. This has to be a three-phase game, and the offense has to do their part in that. And so for me, I think you actually do want to do some clock chewing, and just like I said with Winnipeg, you do want to soften up that D line. You want to tire them down. Running at them and running at them successfully will in turn slow down that pass rush, and it also makes for potential breakout plays later in the game as that D-line starts to get more and more tired, and you're forcing linebackers to commit. And so that's where we get to the next step of our game too. Like, once we're prioritizing field position, like if Toronto gets stuck in their own end, Toronto's got first down from their own 8. Priority isn't scoring points on that drive, in my mind. The way this game is going to go with the clock chewing and everything else, priority is let's get out of our end. Let's win the field position battle. Let's use our specialists who are having an amazing season. Just punt the ball way the heck out of here. Let's not be punting from our 8-yard line. And then when you do get plays from specialists, when you do get plays from the defense and you've got fortuitous field position, now you take shots. Now you go for sudden change, momentum swings. That's where I want you to maybe gamble a little bit and see if you can get Winnipeg on their heels. You're going to challenge the offensive line to establish a run game. Even though you know Winnipeg's going to be looking for it, you say, like, this is on you. Like, O-line, you're the best O-line in the league. Show it. Run block. Get these guys out of here. Make some space for Kadeem Carey. And you can bring out some of that Georgia State Panther offense if you wanted, the old Nick Arbuckle stuff that he came into the league with. Like, get some of those RPOs going. You've got the right personnel for it. You got a strong running game, and you've got a receiver that you trust too, in fact, out of the slot, that really are conducive to running those quick sort of glance routes and RPO looks. If you've got one defender to read in DeVaris Daniels, Mackay Polk, no reason why those guys can't be heavily involved as an extension of that run game off those RPO looks. And Arbuckle does do that well. We haven't really seen much of that this year, but in terms of things I want to avoid, I'm staying away from the corners as much as I can. I know I don't want to go near either corner. I don't really want to go at Dietrich Nichols either. I think Nichols is a problem. I think the corners, Ford especially, is a problem. Maybe I'll go the other side. We get some matchups with Coxie. I will take my chances with that. But normally I hate playing for field goals. In a game like this, I will take points. I'll take points from wherever we can get them. Usually I criticize coaches for not going on 3rd and 1 from the other team's 40. In this situation, take the 3 points, kick the field goal. Those 3 points will add up enough. You're trusting the defense to do their job, special teams to do their job in this game. Take any points you can get. JB, what is your defensive plan for the Toronto Argonauts in slowing down Zach Collaros, Brady Oliveira, and the Blue Bomber O?
I mean, it's good. This is how it is. It's going to be on the D. The D is going to need to have a day. That's not necessarily fair, but if I had to, choose a guy to go into battle with, I can't imagine who wouldn't go to battle for Whit McManus. So, I feel confident that he will have that team ready to carry the team. Defensively, stop the run. For me, it's everything. You can, I'm probably looking to, you want to keep that over the top. Look, so that Lawler is not killing you, and he certainly has in the past. Trying to keep the Lawler damage to a minimum if you can get away with him in man, but maybe double him, have the safety come over when he's running down the line there on the rail. But they have to stop the run. You just simply cannot let them get going. If they get the run going, now it's like a boxer. You can't stop the left, you can't stop the right. You're dead. You have to pick one. I would pick the run. They feed off the run. It seems to be much like the Argos fed off Ouellette last year. Like, seems to be part of their sort of football identity. And I think when you control him, you may not be able to control him the whole game, which is fine. But if you can control him in the first half, that gives you a chance to win. So luckily, Toronto may not have to absolutely load the box, but if you have to cheat a little, I'm all for it. And then you just have to not let Lawler beat you deep. You got to play some bend don't break if stopping the run is priority one. But that's what I want. I want him. I want Oliveira given the full McManus treatment, and and let's see where we go from there.
My one thing this week is be tied or better at the end of the first quarter. Get through the first quarter tied or with the lead. If you're trailing in the first quarter, it's not that the game's over, but now you're starting to have to dig a little bit. Everything has to be perfect, a little bit more after that. You need a little bit of a buffer zone. You got to be up. This team they've got all the pieces. If they can get a lead in this game, they've got the pieces to be able to hang on to it. They've got the pieces to slowly chip away and add and keep adding and keep adding. And even if it's just field goals, that's a position I don't mind this week. So get through that first quarter without the house falling down. And I think you're in a pretty good spot if you're the Argonauts. What's your one thing, JB?
Well, I agree with you on that first quarter. I think it's everything. Like Winnipeg was Mike Tyson last week in his prime. They just demolished a very good Saskatchewan team. And I think that Winnipeg comes out and it's going to be a flurry of punches. And if you're able to take them, now we're in a fight. Okay. Now we're both fine. Now we're equals. You've used your opening flurry. Now we're just fighting. And it's just a good equal football game. And I think that's what you want. What you don't want is to give any turnovers or give up any big touchdowns with that flurry, because they're just not built to come back, especially against Winnipeg. I think it would be too much to ask. To that end, my one thing is 5 first downs in the first quarter for Toronto. I think first downs are massive. You don't need to score, but you need to move the ball. You need to give the defense a break. You need to push that field. You need to keep them out of field goal range when they're getting the ball. I think it's really important for the team to be able to move the ball. I don't even care if Trump scores in that first quarter. Just, keep getting some first downs. Let's not have a couple of really, you can have the occasional, they're going to have disheartening series. I think fans need to prepare themselves, much like the beginning of the year, where it's like, 2nd and 11 and a sack for a loss of 8. Oh, now it's 3rd and 22. that's coming. You just have to weather it.
I think one of the big keys that you mentioned is giving the defense rest. Let's not forget about how important that is. Just you can't have the defense running back on there 2 and out every single time because they're going to wear down. Like you can't. That's the recipe for disaster against Winnipeg. Every team this year that has had issues moving the ball has lost to the Blue Bombers because they can just turn on that just eviscerating run game in the fourth quarter where it just completely destroys
Yeah.
you. You can't put yourself in a position where you're exhausted in the fourth defensively.
No. And that was not me. That was a generic announcer voice. That wasn't me doing you or Hoagie.
Okay, that's good. So for predictions, this
I
is
know it sounds so dark, but
no, I feel good. My record predicting Toronto games this year, they've played 20 games this year. I've made predictions in all of them. I'm 16-4 predicting Toronto games. I've hit on wins, I've hit on losses. 16-4 is a pretty good record straight up predicting any CFL team, especially this year. I feel really comfortable with what I see from Toronto week to week. I really like them in this game. I don't think it's going to be a big win. I don't certainly think it's going to be easy. I don't think it's going to be decided even with a minute left in the fourth quarter. But I just think they're going to find a way. They got too many. You look around that room, you start looking. You talked about like 48, but you look at 94 and 7 and 91. Those guys on the defense, 8, 9, 1, 23 that has come out to play. These guys, they're all going to show up. I know they're going to show up, and they just need a few offensive plays and a play or two from Janarian and Grant. I think they're in a really good position. My prediction: Toronto 19, Winnipeg 18. What about you, JB?
yeah, I mean, I think as a coach and I guess an Irish fatalist, I may sound like I'm really down on them. Um, I think the margin for error is really, really small. Having said that, I believe in this defense. I think that it's healthy. I think that they have, like we forget that D line has the ability to flip a game, and that's what we need. Like we haven't really even talked about them. I think they have to get Caleras. Like it's Parrish and Serezna and Flo. They're going to be the game changers. Winton on the run, and I like Toronto to win with at least one special teams touchdown. I like Toronto 24-21.
And it is now time for Put Me Down for 20. And this is our last Put Me Down for 20 of the season. And JB, we both didn't run out of golden fleeces. You had a big win last week, your biggest of the season, the Argos defensive touchdown at plus 490, which was huge. I went 0 for 2 last week. I made the mistake of including the riders on my parlay there. And then I had a Chad Kelly bet that maybe he hits if he plays the fourth quarter, but obviously that was not to be. So I end up with 223 golden fleeces heading into this week, which means I can't, with only 20 on the line this week and one bet, I'm going to, at the worst case scenario, I'm up 3 golden fleeces on the year, and that is a huge win. And as I say that, please remember not to take any of our golden fleece wagering seriously. You should not bet any of your hard-earned money on anything we say, and only ever bet what you're comfortable losing as a price of entertainment. So, JB, you are now sitting at a handsome 140 golden fleeces.
Wow.
You will not be going home broke no matter what happens this week. So, where's your bet going? I'll give you honors as the big winner from last week. Where are you
Well,
putting your 20 golden fleeces this week?
yeah, I'm gonna keep it very simple. I'm gonna put all 20 on the money line, Toronto to win.
I love that bet. I'm following it. I'm doing the same. I think I wish we'd recorded yesterday and we could have put it at like 450 or whatever it was yesterday. Absurd. Money started coming in a bit on Toronto after it opened, going heavily on Winnipeg. But yeah, I just think like you look at this team, plus 330 on a neutral site with all these players you got there. Even if you're someone that doesn't like the Argos to win this game, that value just seems through the roof for me for a team that just came out of the East. So yeah, plus 330 for my 20 golden fleeces. Yes, please. And then turning our attention to our CFL picks, we were both 1-1 last week, so that puts you at 46, 37, and 2, and it puts me at 54, 29, and 2. Last pick of the season, I'm going with the Toronto Argonauts. No way I'm hedging this one. So yeah, I'm writing myself down for Toronto. What am I writing down for you, JB?
Yeah, I agree. I think, obviously on some level, this is our pick since we focus on them, but we've watched them all season. We've paid attention to them. We know the talent that's on this team. They are not to be ignored or cast away as a one player team. They definitely are not that. So I have the Argos.
And again, it's not like we haven't picked against them at times, but and then that
And
sort of happened.
Coach has a good record against Winnipeg. It just is like that. That matters. I don't think you can just rely on it, but it matters. It's nice to feel like you match up. Like it's not in your head if like in the way sometimes Calgary used to be. I like the way that we have played Winnipeg the last couple of years. Yeah, I have never been let down by the coaching staff's preparation for a big game. So.
And with that, I guess we'll start to close things up here. So for the last time this season, let me just, it's our last pregame walkthrough of the year. It doesn't mean we're done. We will have our postgame reaction podcast. And then, of course, we will have our season ending podcast next week, regardless of the outcome, where we've got our X's and Argos awards to hand out, postseason thoughts, and we will send you into the off season with that last episode. So after this one, there are 2 more episodes coming at you, so make sure you don't miss them. Enjoy the Grey Cup Sunday. It's 6 o'clock. Toronto versus Winnipeg at BC Place. Make sure you get down to Something in the Water Brewing for their Grey Cup party as well. It's going to be awesome. That will just about do it for us on this last pregame walkthrough episode of the X's and Argos podcast, Grey Cup edition. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe, foe, foe.